Brazil has made history by holding former President Jair Bolsonaro responsible for his actions, a move that has sent shockwaves throughout the nation and the world. For years, many wondered if a leader could ever truly be held accountable for trying to undermine the very democracy that put him in power. Now that question has been answered in a way that few expected. The courts have sentenced Bolsonaro to prison for his attempt to overthrow the government, a dramatic and unprecedented step in Brazil's modern history. The sight of a former president being led away by police officers surrounded by flashing cameras and a tense public is something that will be remembered for generations. This decision marks a turning point for a country that has struggled to protect its democracy in the face of deep divisions and political unrest. The atmosphere across Brazil is tense, with people gathering in the streets, some in celebration, others in anger or disbelief. The world is watching as Brazil faces a test of its institutions and its commitment to justice. Bolsonaro's presidency was marked by fierce arguments, controversial policies, and a style of leadership that often pushed the boundaries of democratic norms. His speeches were filled with strong, commanding language, and he was never afraid to challenge his opponents or the media. The trial revealed just how fragile democracy can be when power is abused. It exposed the risks that come when a leader tries to bend the rules for personal gain, and the chaos that can follow when the balance of power is threatened. The Supreme Court's verdict sends a powerful message. No one, not even a former president, is above the law. The justice's decision was met with a mix of relief and outrage, but it stands as a clear statement about the rule of law in Brazil. As Bolsonaro remains under house arrest, his loyal supporters have taken to the streets, protesting what they see as an injustice. The country is divided, with some demanding accountability and others calling for his release, creating a volatile and uncertain atmosphere. This moment is a true test of Brazil's democracy. The coming days will show whether its institutions can withstand the pressure and whether the law will be applied equally to all, regardless of status or power. To fully understand the significance of this event, we need to look back at how Bolsonaro rose to power, captured the imagination of millions, and ultimately lost it all in a dramatic fall from grace. Jair Bolsonaro's journey from a little-known army paratrooper to the highest office in Brazil is a story filled with controversy, ambition, and deep divisions. Born in the small town of Glicério, Bolsonaro joined the military at a young age, quickly earning a reputation for his discipline and hardline views. As a paratrooper, he was admired by some for his toughness, but even then, he was outspoken and often clashed with superiors over issues like pay and military policy. Decades later, he would stand before the nation as Brazil's most talked-about president, a figure who inspired both fierce loyalty and intense opposition. Bolsonaro became infamous for his provocative statements, often making headlines for praising Brazil's former military dictatorship and using harsh language against political opponents and minority groups. His unapologetic style drew criticism from human rights organizations, but it also won him a devoted following among those who felt ignored by the political establishment. In the 2010s, Brazil was rocked by a series of massive corruption scandals that shook public trust in government. As anger and frustration grew, Bolsonaro's tough talk and promises to clean up politics began to resonate with millions of Brazilians who were tired of business as usual. Riding this wave of discontent, Bolsonaro's 2018 campaign tapped into the public's desire for change. He promised to restore order, bring back traditional values, and crack down on crime and corruption. His rallies drew huge crowds, and his message spread quickly on social media, where he bypassed traditional news outlets to speak directly to his supporters. Once in office, Bolsonaro's presidency was marked by constant clashes with Congress, the courts, and even members of his own government. His handling of the COVID-19 pandemic was especially controversial. He downplayed the virus, questioned vaccines, and resisted lockdowns, leading to widespread criticism both at home and abroad. As the 2022 election approached, Bolsonaro began attacking Brazil's electronic voting system, claiming without evidence that it was vulnerable to fraud. These claims fueled distrust and deepened divisions across the country, with supporters and opponents clashing in the streets and online. The election against former President Lula da Silva became one of the most heated and polarizing contests in Brazil's history. Families, friends, and entire communities found themselves split as the country's future seemed to hang in the balance. When Bolsonaro refused to concede defeat after the results were announced, it set off a political crisis. His supporters took to the streets, protesting outside government buildings and demanding a reversal of the outcome, while the world watched anxiously. Bolsonaro's rhetoric emboldened a movement that challenged the very foundations of Brazil's democracy. The country faced scenes of unrest and chaos, as some of his most fervent followers stormed government buildings, echoing global concerns about the fragility of democratic institutions. With the Supreme Court and law enforcement stepping in to restore order, Brazil braced itself for a historic confrontation, one that would test the strength and resilience of its democracy like never before. On January 8, 2023, Bolsonaro's supporters stormed Brasilia, much like what happened at the U.S. Capitol. Believing the election was stolen, they attacked government buildings, demanding the military step in. The chaos showed deep cracks in society and tested Brazil's democracy. Government forces eventually brought back order, arresting over 1,500 rioters. Bolsonaro, who was in Florida, was connected to the violence because of his encouraging words. The court found that the uprising was part of a larger plan to overthrow the government. The failed attempt showed how dangerous it is when someone tries to rule like a dictator without limits. Brazil had to face its democratic values head-on. The January 8th riots were part of a bigger plan to keep Bolsonaro in power. High-ranking friends planned to cancel the election results by using military force. The plan included arresting political opponents and making up stories about election fraud. Evidence showed Bolsonaro pushed military leaders to support the takeover. The plan failed because the military wasn't fully on board. The uprising was a desperate try to force the military to step in. The justice system then stepped in to protect democracy. The trial of Jair Bolsonaro marked a turning point in Brazil's legal and political history. As the former president walked into the packed courtroom, the eyes of the nation, and indeed the world, were fixed on the proceedings. This was not just another legal battle. It was a test of Brazil's commitment to democracy and the rule of law. The stakes were incredibly high, with many wondering if justice would truly be served, regardless of Bolsonaro's powerful status. The Supreme Court, under intense scrutiny, presented compelling evidence that revealed a secret and coordinated plan to undermine Brazil's democratic institutions. Judges reviewed hours of testimony, intercepted communications, and detailed documents that painted a clear picture of a conspiracy. The courtroom was tense as the evidence unfolded, showing just how far the alleged plot had reached into the country's political system. Bolsonaro faced accusations of orchestrating a plan to overthrow the government, inciting unrest, and encouraging violent riots that shook the nation. The prosecution argued that his speeches and actions directly led to chaos in the streets, with supporters clashing with police and threatening the stability of Brazil's democracy. The images of unrest became symbols of a country at a crossroads. In response, Bolsonaro's defense team passionately argued that the charges were politically motivated. They claimed he was being unfairly targeted by his opponents and questioned whether the court could remain impartial in such a high-profile case. The defense insisted that the trial was less about justice and more about silencing a political rival, raising concerns about fairness and due process. Despite these arguments, the Supreme Court delivered a unanimous verdict, finding Bolsonaro guilty on all counts. The announcement sent shockwaves through the courtroom, with some expressing relief and others disbelief. The judges emphasized that no one, not even a former president, is above the law. Bolsonaro was sentenced to 27 years in prison, a historic punishment that confirmed his involvement in the attempt to overthrow the government. The sentence was seen as a clear message that Brazil would not tolerate attacks on its democracy, no matter who was responsible. For many Brazilians, the decision represented a major victory for justice and the rule of law. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, waving flags and celebrating what they saw as a new chapter for democracy. The verdict reassured citizens that powerful leaders could be held accountable for their actions. Although Bolsonaro's legal battles are far from over, his political future now appears bleak. The trial has left a lasting impact on Brazil's political landscape, serving as a warning to others who might threaten the country's democratic foundations. Bolsonaro's conviction caused reactions around the world, showing different ways of thinking. Many praised Brazil's judges for protecting democracy. Right-wing groups, including Donald Trump, said the decision was unfair and a witch hunt. The US government's reaction caused tension in its relationship with Brazil. Bolsonaro's son tried to get US support, predicting more punishments. The case became a symbol of the worldwide fight between democracy and strong, bossy rule. The international community is still divided on what the trial means. Brazil's actions set an example for holding leaders accountable. Bolsonaro's conviction changed Brazil's political scene. His supporters continue to protest, making political divisions even stronger. The Bolsonarista movement is still a big force, even without him. Future elections face uncertainty, as Bolsonaro is not allowed to run. The right-wing vote might split up or find new leaders. Lula's government must lead a divided country and rebuild trust. The conviction is a win for democracy, but shows how easily it can be broken. Brazil's path forward needs to close the gaps between people and make democratic values stronger. The fight for Brazil's democratic spirit continues, needing constant effort.